My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 39 years old, and the cruel thing about the moment your life splits in two is that it almost never arrives wearing a warning. There's no thunder, no voice in your head whispering, "Pay attention. This is the last normal hour you'll ever have." Sometimes it comes disguised as grief. Sometimes it waits until everyone is dressed in black. My boyfriend's name is Ryan Mercer. We'd been together for 15 years. We had never made the marriage official, but after that long, after 2 children and 1 house and 1,000 ordinary Tuesdays, paperwork stopped feeling important. He was the father of my children, my person, or at least that's what I used to call him when life still felt simple enough for that phrase to mean something. Ryan was the kind of man women bragged about and other men quietly envied. Reliable, handy, steady. A contractor who could fix a leaking sink, coach our son's soccer team, remember my coffee order, and still somehow ask me how my day was after carrying the weight of everyone else's problems on his back. He never forgot birthdays, never forgot anniversaries, even the unofficial ones. He showed up every single time, and maybe that was part of the problem, not him. The steadiness, the sameness, the unbearable predictability of waking up every morning inside a life that looked good from the outside and felt like I was disappearing inside it. We had 2 children, Noah, 10, and Lily, 7. A house in the suburbs, carpools, grocery lists, mortgage payments, school pickup, sick days, family pictures where everyone smiled hard enough to look happy. I told myself I should have been grateful. Most days, I even pretended I was. But somewhere around year 9, something in me curdled. It wasn't that I stopped loving Ryan, it was worse than that. I started resenting how safe he made everything feel. I started looking at my own life like it belonged to somebody else, somebody older, duller, already finished. I worked in marketing. Same meetings, same deadlines, same polished version of myself every day. At home, I was somebody's mother, somebody's partner, somebody's daughter. At work, I was competent and forgettable. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I stopped feeling like a woman anyone truly saw. And that's how the affair started. Not with some grand tragedy, not with a broken relationship or some dramatic confession, with attention. A work conference in Chicago. Hotel bar lighting. A man named Tyler Cross, a sales director from a competitor, leaning in like everything I said mattered. He was charming in a dangerous, effortless way. The kind of man who listened too carefully, smiled too slowly, and made you feel selected. We slept together the first night. I wish I could tell you I was drunk, or heartbroken, or manipulated, or anything that would make me sound less pathetic. I wasn't. I was flattered. I was reckless. I was starving to feel interesting. The next morning, I swore it was over. I went home to Ryan and the kids and school lunches and laundry baskets and told myself it had been a temporary lapse, one ugly, selfish mistake buried under distance and shame. But Tyler kept texting, then calling, then finding reasons to be in town. He made me feel visible in a way that felt intoxicating. So I answered. Then I lied. Then I lied again. 6 months of fake late meetings and work trips that weren't work trips at all. Hotel rooms, rushed showers, messages deleted in parking lots. That awful, splitting sensation of living 2 lives at once and pretending neither one was killing you. Ryan never said a word. If he suspected anything, he hid it well. He kept making dinner, kept kissing my forehead, kept asking if I was exhausted, if work was too much, if there was anything he could do to help. And God, I hated him a little for being so decent, because every kindness made me feel filthier. My mother's name is Barbara Whitmore. She was 56. My father, Robert, died 4 days before everything detonated. Massive heart attack. Instant, they said. 58 years old. Worked in banking his whole life. Conservative with money, careful with his blood pressure, faithful to routines, faithful to family. The kind of man who believed stability was love. He died at his desk on a Tuesday afternoon, and by Thursday, half the town seemed to know. The funeral was packed. Dad had been loved in that quiet, sturdy way that doesn't trend or sparkle, but leaves a real mark. Colleagues, neighbors, church friends, cousins I hadn't seen in years. Women from the choir crying into tissues. Men clapping Ryan on the shoulder. Children told to sit still and speak softly, because this was sacred ground. Barbara stood at the podium in black, pale and composed, and spoke about 38 years of marriage like she was reading from the book of her own grief. She called my father her soulmate, her best friend, her whole world. I believed her. That's the part that still humiliates me. I believed every word. After the service, people gathered at my parents' house, the house I grew up in, the house where my father had lived until 4 days earlier, the house that still smelled faintly like his aftershave and old wood and coffee. Women filled the kitchen with casseroles and paper plates. My children ran through the backyard with their cousins, too young to understand that death was supposed to slow a house down. Ryan was helping serve drinks. I was standing near the kitchen island, half listening to my aunt talk about flower arrangements, when my mother called everyone into the living room. I need to say something while everyone's here. There was that automatic hush people use around grief, the kind that assumes more sadness is coming. We gathered around the fireplace. Barbara stood there with both hands folded too tightly over her stomach. Her face looked strange. Not devastated, not exactly. Tense. Braced. "I know the timing is terrible," she said, voice trembling. "But I can't hide this any longer." A pause. Then, "I'm pregnant." The room went dead. Not quiet. Dead. No forks clinking. No children laughing from outside. Just that suffocating silence that means everyone heard the same impossible thing and is waiting for someone else to explain it. Then the whispers started. Dates. Math. My father had been sick for months before he died, bedridden the last several weeks. Everyone in that room knew the timeline made no sense. My Aunt Margaret spoke first, because of course she did. "Barbara, how is that possible?" My mother lifted her chin, and in that second, I saw something flash across her face that made my stomach turn over. Fear.
Guilt. Defiance.
It's not Robert's. The room seemed to tilt. I felt Ryan beside me go rigid. I turned toward him instinctively, searching his face for confusion, disgust, anything human and recognizable. He looked pale, but not surprised. That was the moment I knew. Not when she said the name, not when the room exploded. That tiny absence of shock told me first. My mother looked at me and said, "It's Ryan's." Everything after that became fragments. Someone dropped a plate. My sister burst into tears. My aunt screamed so loudly it made Lily start crying somewhere down the hall. I stared at Ryan as if I had never seen him before. At the man who had shared my bed, raised my children, tied Noah's cleats, rubbed my shoulders when I had migraines, kissed me goodbye that very morning before we came to bury my father. "Tell me she's lying." My voice barely sounded like mine. "Ryan, tell me she's lying." He opened his mouth, closed it, and I saw the apology before I heard it. "Claire, I'm sorry." I lunged at him. Not metaphorically, not dramatically, physically. I went for him with both hands, and only my brother catching my arm kept me from reaching his face. "How long?" I screamed. "How long?" It was my mother who answered. 5 years. 5 years. The number went through me like broken glass. 5 Christmases. 5 Thanksgivings. 5 years of family dinners where I sat across from both of them and noticed nothing. 5 years of her babysitting my children. 5 years of Ryan carrying boxes into my parents' house and kissing my forehead in the kitchen while my mother watched from the doorway. 5 years while my father was alive. 5 years while Lily was still little enough to mispronounce his name. 5 years while I thought boredom was the most dangerous thing in my life. You were sleeping with her while Dad was alive? Ryan tried to step toward me. Claire, please, let me explain. Explain what? I shouted. How you slept with my mother in the house where I grew up? How you looked my father in the eye and shook his hand while this was happening? My mother started crying then. Actual tears, which only made it worse. Claire, I never meant. You're pregnant with my boyfriend's baby, I snapped. And you announced it at Dad's funeral. What exactly did you think was going to happen? The room was dissolving around us. People grabbing coats, pulling children closer, escaping the wreckage. My brother still held me back while my sister sobbed into her hands, and my aunt called my mother things I had never heard spoken aloud in a family home. And beneath all of it, like a second heartbeat, one thought pulsed in my skull. I was cheating too. 6 months, not 5 years. Not with my mother. Not with someone my father trusted, but cheating, lying, betraying. My brother dragged me outside before I did something that would follow me forever. I sat in his car, shaking so hard my teeth hurt, while he went back in to get Noah and Lily. When they climbed into the back seat, Noah looked confused. Lily looked scared. "Mommy," she whispered. Why was everyone yelling? I turned toward the window, because if I looked at her, I would break open right there. That night, after the kids were asleep on borrowed blankets in my brother's guest room, I sat alone on his couch in the dark and stared at my phone. Tyler had texted 3 days earlier, "Thinking about you. When can I see you again?" My thumb hovered over the screen. My boyfriend had been sleeping with my mother for 5 years. My mother was pregnant with his baby. My father was in the ground. And still, somehow, the ugliest truth in the room was that I was not innocent either. The morning after everything shattered didn't feel dramatic. There was no moment where I woke up and remembered all at once. It came in pieces. The unfamiliar ceiling above me in my brother's guest room. The stiffness in my neck from sleeping half upright. The quiet. Too quiet for a house with children in it. And then, it hit. Ryan. My mother. 5 years. Pregnant. I sat up so fast I felt dizzy. For a few seconds, I thought maybe I had imagined it. That grief had twisted reality into something grotesque and impossible. Then low. Confused. Why is Dad not here? And I knew it was real. I didn't go back to that house. Not that day. Not the next. I stayed. Ryan checked into a hotel. My mother, no one knew where she went. Or if they did, they didn't tell me. At first, that gave me something to hold on to. Righteousness. Clean. I blocked Ryan's calls. Ignored his texts. When I finally responded, it was just one message. "Don't contact me again. Get a lawyer." He replied almost instantly. "Claire, please, let me see the kids. Let me explain." Explain. That word made my stomach turn. Explain 5 years. Explain every dinner, every smile, every moment he stood in my parents' kitchen like he belonged there. Explain how my mother ended up pregnant with his child. There was no explanation big enough for that. I didn't respond. 3 hours later, Tyler called. I stared at his name on my screen like it belonged to a different life. For a second, I almost answered. Habit is a powerful thing. Then I declined the call. He texted immediately. "Hey, beautiful. I'm in town next week. Want to meet?" The words made me feel sick. Not because of him, because of me. Because 6 months ago, I would have smiled reading that. Would have felt that little flicker of excitement. That validation I had convinced myself I needed. Now it just looked pathetic. Ugly. I blocked his number, deleted every message, every photo, every trace of that version of me. Not because I had suddenly become a better person, but because whatever I had done, it felt small and dirty compared to what Ryan and my mother had destroyed. Or at least that's what I told myself. That illusion didn't last long. "Claire," my brother said that afternoon, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, his voice careful. "There's something you need to hear." I rubbed my temples. What could possibly make this worse? He hesitated. People are talking. Of course they were. They're saying maybe things weren't good between you and Ryan. That you've been distant, traveling a lot, working late. My stomach dropped. So this is my fault? I didn't say that. That's exactly what you're saying. I'm saying people are going to look for reasons, he said quietly. And you need to be ready for that. I laughed.
A sharp, humorless sound.
My boyfriend slept with my mother for 5 years and got her pregnant, and people are trying to figure out what I did wrong. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't have to, because part of me already knew. The first week passed in a blur of legal consultations, whispered phone calls, and trying to keep things normal for the kids when nothing was normal anymore. I hired a lawyer, filed for separation, requested full custody. It felt like taking control, like reclaiming something, like drawing a line that said, I am the wronged one here. I needed that.
Desperately.
Because if I wasn't the victim, then what was I? The answer came in an envelope. Ryan's lawyer.
Thick. Official.
Heavy, in a way paper shouldn't be. I sat at my brother's dining table and opened it with shaking hands and watched my illusion collapse, line by line. Every business trip from the past 6 months.
Documented.
Every late night. Every unexplained absence. Every hotel booking. Every receipt. Every inconsistency. They knew, not just vaguely, not suspiciously.
Completely.
My chest tightened as I flipped through page after page. Chicago. Denver. 2 nights in a hotel that had never been on any company itinerary. A restaurant bill for 2 when I had claimed I ate alone. Dates, times, locations. Tyler. They didn't say his name. They didn't need to. The message was clear. We know. I don't know how. Maybe Ryan had suspected. Maybe he'd followed me. Maybe he'd hired someone. Maybe Tyler had said something. It didn't matter. The truth was no longer mine to control. My lawyer didn't sugarcoat it. Claire, she said, folding her hands on her desk, if you've been having an affair, your position just got significantly weaker. I stared at her. But he slept with my mother for 5 years. I understand that. That's worse. In terms of shock value, yes. In terms of morality, yes. In terms of how a court will view it, she shook her head slightly. Infidelity is infidelity. That's insane. That's family law. I felt something inside me crack. He could argue, she continued, that your affair came first, that he felt neglected, that his actions were a response. That's not true. It doesn't have to be completely true, she said calmly. It just has to be arguable. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly exhausted. So what are you saying? I'm saying if you push for full custody, they will expose everything. Publicly. In court. Everything. My lies. My choices. My 6 months of pretending to be someone else. And that will affect custody? It will affect how the court views both of you, she said. And right now, you don't have clean hands. Clean hands. I almost laughed. None of us did. I settled. I didn't fight.
Joint custody.
50-50. The house would be sold. Assets divided. On paper, it looked fair. In reality, it felt like losing something I hadn't even realized I was bargaining away. The legal battle was only the beginning. The social fallout was worse, much worse. It spread quietly at first. A conversation here, a comment there, then faster, through family, through friends, through work, through people I hadn't spoken to in years, but who suddenly had opinions about my life. My affair became public knowledge. Someone at the office had seen me and Tyler together, told someone, who told someone else. And just like that, it wasn't just Ryan and my mother anymore. It was me too. My Aunt Margaret cornered me at the grocery store. Your father would be ashamed of you, she said, loud enough for 2 people in the next aisle to hear. I froze. For cheating on your partner while he was working to support your family. Ryan was sleeping with my mother, I snapped. And what were you doing? She shot back. Where were you on all those trips? Her words hit harder than I expected. Because they weren't wrong. That's what made them unbearable. Friends started pulling away, subtly at first. Canceled plans, delayed responses, group chats that went quiet when I spoke. Melissa, my best friend since college, finally said it out loud over a painfully awkward lunch. Claire, I love you. You know that. Then say something that sounds like it, she sighed. People are having a hard time with what you did. What I did? I repeated, incredulous. What about Ryan and my mother? That's disgusting, she said quickly. Obviously, no one is defending that. Then why does it feel like I'm the one being punished? Because you cheated too, she said gently. And now it looks like you're only angry because you got caught second. That's not fair. Maybe not, she admitted. But that's what people are saying.
Hypocrite.
The word hung in the air between us, even though she didn't say it out loud. I heard it anyway. Work became unbearable. Whispers in hallways. Conversations that stopped when I walked into rooms. Tyler was fired. Violation of company policy. That's what they called it. As if reducing it to corporate language made it less ugly. I wasn't fired, but I was moved. Different department. Different team. A polite warning delivered with a tight smile. You're on thin ice, Claire. Like I didn't already know I was standing on something that had shattered beneath me. 6 weeks after the funeral, I saw Ryan for the first time since that day.
A parking lot. Neutral ground.
That's what the lawyers called it. I pulled in with Noah and Lily in the back seat. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my fingers hurt. Ryan was already there, waiting. When the kids saw him, they lit up. Dad! They ran to him without hesitation, without doubt, without knowing. He dropped to his knees and hugged them, like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. And for a moment, just a moment, I saw the man I had built a life with, the father of my children. Not the betrayal, not the lies, just him. He looked up at me over their shoulders. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't defensive. They were sad. How are you holding up? He asked quietly. I almost laughed. Are you seriously asking me that? Claire, we don't get to have normal conversations anymore, I cut in. We need to, he said. For them. Always for them. The kids are confused, he continued. They're scared. They need stability. They need a father who didn't sleep with their grandmother, I snapped. The words came out before I could stop them, and the second they did, I knew. Noah had gone still, completely still. He was standing right there, close enough, old enough. Dad. Did what? He whispered. The silence that followed was worse than the one at the funeral, because this time, it was my fault. Ryan's face hardened, not with anger, with something else, something heavier. He didn't look at me again, just opened the car door and ushered the kids inside. Get in, bud. Noah didn't move at first. He just stared at me, like he didn't recognize me, like something inside him had shifted. Then he got in. Ryan closed the door, drove away. Didn't look back. I stood there in that parking lot long after they were gone. The world felt hollow, like everything important had already happened, and now I was just standing in the aftermath. And for the first time, it wasn't Ryan I was thinking about, or my mother, or even the affair. It was Noah. The look on his face, the moment I had just taken something from him, he could never get back. I sank into my car and pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. And finally, I understood something I had been trying very hard not to see. I wasn't just the woman who had been betrayed. I was someone who had started breaking things long before I ever knew they were broken. 2 months after the funeral, my mother resurfaced, not in person, not with a phone call. With a letter, 8 pages, handwritten. Folded carefully like that somehow made it more sincere. I almost didn't open it. I stood in my apartment kitchen, still not quite my apartment yet, just a place filled with half-unpacked boxes and borrowed furniture, and stared at the envelope like it might explode. Part of me wanted to burn it without reading a word. The other part needed to know. I opened it. She started with my name, Claire. Not my daughter, not sweetheart, Not anything that sounded like the woman who raised me.
Just Claire. The letter was exactly what you'd expect, and somehow worse.
She said it started innocently.
Of course it did.
It always does. Conversations in the kitchen. Shared complaints. Quiet moments when everyone else was busy. She wrote about feeling invisible after 35 years of marriage. About how my father loved her, but stopped seeing her somewhere along the way.
That word again. Invisible.
The same word I had used to justify my own betrayal. I stopped reading for a moment, pressing my fingers into my eyes, because the worst part wasn't what she had done. It was that I understood it. Not the choice. Never the choice, but the feeling. She wrote about Ryan, how he listened, how he noticed things, how he made her feel young again, how what started as something harmless turned into something they couldn't stop. Couldn't stop. 5 years. I almost laughed. 5 years of couldn't stop. She said she loved my father, that she always would, that he was her soulmate, but she also loved Ryan. Present tense. Loved. And the baby was not a mistake. It was a blessing, a second chance. She wrote that she was keeping it, that they were keeping it, Ryan and her, together. Like it was the most natural sentence in the world. Like she wasn't describing something that had shattered every structure our family had ever stood on. The last page was an apology, repeated over and over again in different words. I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't plan for this. I love you. I folded the letter, walked to the sink, and burned it, piece by piece, watching the edges curl, the ink blacken, the words disappear. Because if I let myself keep it, I might start believing parts of it. And that terrified me more than anything. 3 months after the funeral, Tyler tried to contact me again. Different number. Different approach. I heard what happened. I'm sorry. I didn't respond. Didn't hesitate. Blocked. Whatever that thing between us had been, it wasn't real. It wasn't love. It wasn't even connection. And I was done running. 4 months after the funeral, everything became official. The custody agreement. The division of everything we had built over 15 years. Half the house. Half the life. On paper, it looked clean.
Fair.
Balanced. In reality, it felt like someone had taken a knife and carefully split my existence down the middle. Ryan moved on. That's how people described it. He moved on. As if what he had done was just another version of healing. He moved on with my mother. I became the woman whose boyfriend left her for her own mother. But that wasn't the whole story. It never was. I was also the woman who had been cheating. And that part followed me everywhere. 5 months after the funeral, I ran into Ryan's sister at a store. She didn't avoid me, didn't pretend not to see me. She walked straight up. Claire. I froze. I need you to know something, she said. I braced myself. What Ryan and your mother did is unforgivable. A flicker of relief. Small.
Brief.
But what you did matters too. There it was. I know, I said quietly. Do you? Her eyes held mine, steady, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're playing the victim when you were doing the same thing. It's not the same, I said, sharper than I intended. She nodded slowly. You're right. It's not. For a second, I thought she was agreeing with me. Then she added, at least Ryan waited until he was in love. The words landed like a slap. You just wanted excitement. She walked away before I could respond. Before I could defend myself, before I could say something that would probably only make it worse. Because the truth was, she wasn't wrong. I hadn't loved Tyler. I hadn't even liked him that much. I liked how he made me feel, and I had been willing to risk everything for that feeling. 6 months after the funeral, the baby was born. A girl. They named her Hope. Hope Elizabeth. I found out the same way everyone else did. Facebook. A photo. Ryan, sitting in a hospital chair, holding a newborn wrapped in a pale pink blanket. My mother beside him.
Glowing.
Smiling. Radiant in a way grief was supposed to erase. The caption. Welcome to the world, Hope Elizabeth. Our miracle. 300 likes. Dozens of comments. Beautiful family. so happy for you both. What a blessing. No one mentioned my father. No one mentioned me. No one mentioned that this child was both my children's sister and their cousin. The world had already rewritten the story, turned something grotesque into something romantic, something complicated into something admirable. And I was just the bitter woman who couldn't let it go. 7 months after the funeral, Melissa texted me. Short. Careful. Claire, I'm getting married next year. I wanted to tell you personally, I can't invite you. I stared at the message for a long time, finally typed back. Why? Her reply came quickly. Kevin knows everything. He's not comfortable. Not comfortable. That was what I had become.
An uncomfortable presence.
A cautionary tale. Someone people didn't want at their weddings, in case I somehow contaminated the idea of commitment just by being there. I didn't respond. What was there to say? Noah started therapy around that time. At first, he didn't want to go, refused to talk, sat in silence. Then, slowly, he started asking questions. Not to me, to someone else.
Safer.
More neutral. His therapist called me in one afternoon. Noah is struggling with trust, she said gently. My chest tightened. In what way? He's asked me several times if love always ends in betrayal. I closed my eyes. What did you tell him? That adults make mistakes, she said. But I also need you to understand something, Claire. I braced myself. No one knows about your affair. My eyes snapped open. What? Ryan told them age-appropriate details, she continued. After the incident in the parking lot, he felt it was necessary. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. He told them I cheated? You had already introduced the idea, she said carefully. He expanded on it. Of course he did. Of course. Now Noah feels betrayed by both of you. Both. Not him. Not me. Both. And Lily? She's internalizing it differently. Withdrawal, sadness. She's quieter, less expressive. That was putting it gently. Lily had stopped drawing. She used to draw constantly. Animals, people, entire worlds in bright, messy colors. Now her sketchbook sat untouched, like something inside her had gone still. 8 months after the funeral, I moved into a smaller apartment. 2 bedrooms. Barely enough space.
Barely affordable.
The kids hated it. Not because it was small, because it wasn't home. Why can't we just live in one house again? Lily asked one night. I swallowed hard. It's not that simple, baby. But you both made mistakes, she said. 7 years old, and already seeing something I had spent months trying to deny. Out of the mouths of children. 9 months after the funeral, Ryan and my mother got married. Small ceremony. Immediate family, which did not include me, but it included my children. Noah in a suit. Lily in a flower girl dress. They sent me pictures afterward. I don't know if it was intentional, if they meant to hurt me, or if they thought they were sharing something joyful. Either way, it worked. I stared at those photos for a long time. At Ryan, at my mother, standing together like none of this was twisted, like this was just another love story, and my children smiling. Standing beside them, part of it. That's when it fully hit me. Not just what I had lost, but what had replaced me. They had a new family now, one that functioned, one that looked whole in pictures. Ryan, my mother, baby Hope, and my children orbiting that center, learning how to exist inside it without me at the core. I sat alone in my apartment that night, the silence louder than anything I had ever experienced. And for the first time, it wasn't anger I felt. It was absence. A hollow space where something permanent used to be, something I had helped destroy. 10 months after the funeral, I started therapy. Not because I wanted to, because I had run out of places to hide. The first session was quiet, controlled. I told my story the way I had been telling it for months. Carefully structured, emotionally convincing, just enough vulnerability to sound honest without actually exposing anything I didn't want to look at too closely. My therapist listened, didn't interrupt, didn't nod in sympathy the way people had in the beginning. When I finished, she asked one question. "Why did you cheat, Claire?" I blinked. The question felt smaller than everything else.
Simpler.
I was unhappy, I said. I felt invisible, bored, like my life had become predictable. She didn't react. "Ryan's affair doesn't excuse yours," she said calmly. "I know that." "Then answer the question again." I shifted in my seat. "I told you, I felt—" "No," she cut in gently. "Those are feelings. I'm asking about the choice." The word landed heavier than I expected.
Choice.
"I chose to cheat," I said quietly. "Why?" "Because I could. Because I wanted to. Because it felt good. Because no one was stopping me. Because I thought I deserved something more." The answers crowded my mind, ugly and unfiltered. "I wanted to feel something different," I said finally. She studied me for a moment. "And Ryan?" My jaw tightened. "He slept with my mother for 5 years. That's what he did," she said. "Not why." I stared at her. "He could say something very similar to what you just said," she continued. "That he felt unseen, unappreciated. That he connected with someone who made him feel alive again. That doesn't make it the same." "No," she agreed. "It doesn't." Relief flickered. Then she added, "But it doesn't make it different in the way you want it to be either." The room felt smaller. "What do you mean?" "You both betrayed your relationship," she said. "You both lied. You both created separate lives outside your family. You both made choices that directly impacted your children." "He did it with my mother," I said, my voice sharper now. "That matters." "It matters emotionally," she said. "It matters in how shocking and painful it is. But in terms of the core behavior," she paused. "It's still a betrayal." I looked away, because I could feel it, the truth of it.
Heavy. Uncomfortable. Inescapable.
"So what?" I said, my voice quieter now. "You're saying we're the same?" "I'm saying," she replied, "that you both contributed to the destruction of your family. The details are different. The damage is shared." I left that session feeling like something inside me had been stripped away. Not the pain. Not the anger. The illusion. The one I had been holding on to since the funeral. That I was the victim. That I had been wronged in a way that placed me above everything else. That his betrayal somehow erased mine. It didn't. It just sat beside it. 2 separate choices. 2 separate failures. Colliding into the same outcome. 1 year after my father's funeral, I went to his grave alone. It was early. Quiet. The kind of morning where the world feels suspended for a moment, before it starts moving again. I stood there for a long time before I said anything. "I'm sorry, Dad." The words came out softer than I expected. "I'm sorry you didn't know." About Mom. About Ryan. About everything that was already breaking long before you were gone. "I'm sorry I wasn't paying attention." That one hurt more. Because it was true. I had been so caught up in my own escape, my own distractions, my own selfish little world, that I had missed things. Missed him. Missed signs. Missed the quiet unraveling happening right in front of me. I'm sorry I became someone you wouldn't recognize. That was the hardest part. Not what had been done to me. What I had done. Who I had allowed myself to become. I stood there until the silence felt too heavy to carry anymore. Then I left. I'm 39 years old, divorced, co-parenting, living in a 2-bedroom apartment that still doesn't feel like home. Ryan is married to my mother. They have a daughter together, Hope. My children spend half their time there, with them, with her, building a life that looks normal, happy even, at least in pictures. Tyler is gone, married someone else, moved on like I was just a brief chapter he never needed to revisit. My family is fractured beyond repair. Some of them don't speak to me. Some don't speak to Ryan and my mother. No one speaks to everyone. And the center of it all, my children, are still trying to understand how love turned into something they can't trust. Noah asks fewer questions now, not because he understands more, because he expects less. Lily is still quiet, still holding things inside, still not drawing. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. The affair. I always say yes, and that's true, but it's not the whole truth. The whole truth is harder to admit. I regret getting caught. I regret not ending it sooner. I regret that Ryan's betrayal was more dramatic than mine. That he got there first. That for a brief, fleeting moment, I got to be the victim before the truth leveled everything. I don't get to claim moral high ground. I don't get to be the wronged woman. I don't get to rewrite the story in a way that makes me clean. I'm just another person who broke something important and has to live with what's left. Ryan took my mother. He built a new life out of the wreckage. And I handed him part of the destruction before I even knew what he was doing. We both made choices. We both lied. We both put ourselves first. And our children, they're the ones who have to grow up inside the consequences. If you're reading this and thinking about cheating because you're bored, don't. Because you don't get to control what happens next. You don't get to decide how the story ends. You don't get to be the victim just because someone else does something worse. You don't cancel out betrayal with betrayal. You multiply it. You spread it. You turn something fragile into something unrecognizable. Ryan took my mother, but I picked Tyler. And somewhere between those two choices, we destroyed everything.